Also, since we mentioned double take, I obviously have to ask because a 17 member, Joshua did a cover for it, and I remember it like people went ballistic.
Definitely a possibility. We were in talks to do something, and the timing of it just didn't quite align. But huge fan of theirs at 17s, and would love to.
What gives you that conviction that it's okay to release?
Make a 6 minutes.
because
it's a good question. And even if my career ended, on this album, I would feel at least that I did what I needed to do.
Listen, you're just getting started. Hi, this is Bhavna and you're watching India Today. I'm very happy to be joined by Dhruv, who is all set to release his first studio album, Private Blizzard, right here with me. Firstly, a huge welcome to India Today. Dhruv, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
It's all my pleasure, actually. But tell me, how has your time in India been so far? Firstly, let's start with that.
It's been great. I mean, I got in at like 3 a.m., 4 a.m., so I haven't really seen that much on this trip. But I was here last year for a tour, and it was the most amazing trip.
What was your best memory?
I played a show at Antisocial in Mumbai, and it was like such a fun show because my mom actually spent a lot of her 20s here, so she came and her friends came as well to the show, and it was like it was just a fun show.
Lovely. So now let's get started with the album because I'm very excited for it. So far, you have only released like singles and there has been a mixtape for sure. But this is like a full-length album for the first time. I know it's very difficult to sort of compile all these songs and create an album. Can you take me through that process perhaps?
Yeah, making an album is like a mountain. I think there's so many moments when you are in the process of it that you don't know whether it's going to be finished, and like it's such a thing of sifting through things that you've started. And I think with this album initially I really struggled to come up with a follow-up to my last project, in part because it was successful and I was very nervous about continuing the momentum. So initially at the beginning I was really stuck on and stumped on how to go ahead with it. But I found the person that I wanted to work with. His name is JT, and he was in Nashville. And from then, he was very encouraging. We had many bad days, of course, but I think through just constantly showing up, we ended up making this album.
But that is what it is, right? I mean, a lot of people wouldn't know, but there are too many bad days when you have to really just show up, which goes behind all these, there's just the creation of the album. So I want to know, when you're working on certain songs, which can be more, which takes a lot from you as an artist, because you're also sharing a part of you through your songs, right? It could be, I don't know, it could be either cathartic or it could be very draining. What is it?
It's ultimately cathartic, but the process of making the song can be exhausting.
Yeah.
There are times where you have...
That's why it is written. But the reason why I ask is because even sleep is exhausting. I can just imagine
this. I mean, it's definitely playing into the last couple of years, I think, have been just interesting in many ways. This album definitely deals with more intense things, like, the end of a relationship, like friendship sort of like dissolving, and kind of just the existential questions that come with, being further along in music, but also older. So this album is definitely more intense. It was definitely draining in parts to make it, but I think ultimately the product, having it feels like, okay, good. I've made something of that pain or whatever.
But what is your process like? Because, is it like you're feeling something at the moment, you just write down, you just note down those feelings because you know that eventually you will come back to this when you're writing? Or is it something that you're just jamming and it just comes with people around you and it just organically flows? Like, what is that process like for you?
It's a bit of both. I like to keep ideas. So if I come up with something interesting, or if somebody texts me something that I think could be an interesting song or whatever, I'll make a mental note of it.
Like a random text as well?
Yeah, if somebody says something like inadvertently poetic on a text or something, I'll think, okay, there could be an interesting spin on that or something. But I definitely take inspiration from the world around me, and I make mental notes, but sometimes you have songs that just flow out of you, and you're in the room, and it's the most amazing feeling, because something that didn't exist 5 minutes ago is out of thin air, is produced.
Do you believe in writing songs about personal experiences that you have had more? Or are you also like okay with writing a song which you perhaps don't relate to personally, in the sense that it's not your personal experience, but something that you've perhaps like a shared experience which you have heard from people.
Yep.
But you can. What are you more comfortable in?
I'm really bad at writing from a fictional point of view.
So it has to be more authentic to you.
I think so. I don't think I have the brain to like the natural brain to like put something together that isn't that doesn't feel true to me. My process is born out of just like my own life and a form of therapy or whatever. So for me, it's always personal, I think.
Which is that one song in this album that you always come back to, and you're just like, oh my God, I don't know how I managed to do this, but I'm super proud of it, because that happens, right?
Right.
I'm sure there will be a couple of them, but there's always that one song perhaps which you thought that I don't know how
it's going to come together.
Yeah, but it did.
There's a song on the album called Daggers. It's a 6-minute song, and
wow.
Yeah, it's about the end of like a friendship feeling sort of betrayed by something, and I think for a long time being unable to get over it. And so for me to have finally been able to put those thoughts down into words and make something of this scale feels like I can't believe I did that, because I was so consumed by the emotion. I can't believe I found the mental space to be able to sit down and write it out and put it in a song.
It's also important to know the feedback that is coming from the audience, because that's the only way you're going to grow as an artist, right? But in today's time, the feedback is just like you don't know how to measure it, because social media is not really the only barometer for feedback, but also a very big barometer. So how do you like filter out constructive perhaps feedback that you're getting versus something which might not be really
productive?
It might just be like someone just targeting you.
I am still learning to be good at it. Social media, I wish I didn't care as much about it as I did, because we all wish that it didn't affect us as much as it did, especially right now with music. So much of it is like being in front of people's faces, in screens all the time, and I'm like naturally so introverted, I think. So social media definitely does affect me, and I definitely do take things to heart, but the ultimate winner is when you play a song live and you see people's faces.
True.
You see the way that people respond to music in that setting, how people come together, people who you don't even know.
Absolutely.
That's the most gratifying thing.
Do you have a set of people around you whom you sort of bounce off your ideas and songs and lyrics to, who are your sounding board perhaps? Because sometimes I feel we think this is a great line, but it's not necessarily is, because it is only when people around you hear and resonate is when you know that it kind of connects, right? So who are those people who are your sounding board?
So my producer this time was a huge sounding board for me. He was like, I would be playing him music, and he's a very no person, which I like. He's not a yes person. He's not going to be like, oh, amazing. He'll be like, that's really bad. Don't. He'd be like, that's jarring. That's why are you including that in a song? As a listener, he's thinking about that. But then also, people who know me really well, so my sister and stuff, I like to play them music because I want to know if I'm convincing them. They know me well, so they know whether my music is saying it the way that I would say it.
Absolutely.
So I show it to them as well.
Are they also very critical?
My
family can be
they are critical, and sometimes you don't want to hear it. Like I remember at the beginning of making this album, when I was like, the label was on me, like, what's the follow-up song? What's the next thing that you're gonna do? I would be like stress making music and convincing myself that it was decent, and then I would show it to my sister, and she'd be like, no, this is really bad. And so it's like you don't want to hear it, but you need to hear it.
But how do you stop? Because as artists, you're anyway critical, right?
Yeah.
All it takes is one comment to make you more critical about anything that you're doing. How do you achieve that balance where you know that, okay, this could be a constructive feedback, yes, but I believe this is how it is supposed to be, because no one knows the album, no one knows your sound more than you. People can have opinions, sure, but I mean, you have to have that balance, right? How do you achieve that?
It's looking at comments that are, if somebody says I don't like it, that's totally fine. It's personal taste. Music is completely subjective. If somebody says like, I thought the verse was too long, or that to me feels like okay, that's constructive things that maybe they're hearing within the song that aren't making complete sense to them, and that's like something that I understand or like. But typically I find that I trust the people that I work with so much before the music comes out.
Yeah.
And like what we do in the moment, like there's a piece of knowing that like it's a collaboration process. This is not just me. It's me and my collaborators, and we're all coming together to make this thing.
Yeah.
And so I think when you put it out, you have this sense of knowing of like, okay, we've done this together, and like this isn't just like me going astray. This was like there was thought behind this, and if people don't like it after that, then I mean it's the faith. It's the faith. It's
I just believe that is what it is destined to be. But at the same time, you know, like you mentioned, this one song Daggers, right, which is like 6 minutes long. In today's time, to have a song which is 6 minutes, because everyone talks about attention span, the length of the songs are coming down from 3 to 2.5 to now almost like 1.45.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just decreasing because of the attention span. What gives you that conviction that it's okay to release?
Make a 6 minutes.
Because
it's a good question.
Because I feel that it's bold in today's time, especially.
When you have a song like Double Take on the first project that goes so viral, I think where my brain initially went was to people, was thinking about audiences, thinking about what they would want. How do I recreate this? How do I convince people I'm not a fluke? How do I...
Yeah.
And I think you realize after a point that it's the thing that makes you love music is your relationship with music itself, and not as much the relationship with the audience. Like I started making music because I loved it and because I wanted to do it, and making this album was coming back to that process and making things. The only way that I could get over my block was by being like, would I want to listen to this? Does this make sense for me? And that's kind of the way that I push forward. So 6 minute song, most of the songs I would say minimum, there's only one song that's 2 minutes, everything is 3 to 6.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's bold. But that's also nice, because I feel that if y'all don't challenge that notion, then who will? Someone will have to keep challenging that notion that, okay, because like you said, there are times when we try to box everything into this numbers that we have and data that we have, but there are some that really surprises people. Right?
There are, and even like this Billie Eilish album, for example, recently is huge, and it has very long songs. It's an album. It's not. There was no drip feeding of singles. Things shift and switch, and rather than trying to adjust, you know, who knows, maybe the thing that you're making will be a part of the next shift of the pendulum.
Absolutely. Especially now with the music scene, I think, because globally no one really knows what works. There's no formula anymore, because it's constantly changing, and great. I mean, no better time for that. But also with that, the meaning of success changes, right? For every artist. What, if I have to ask at this point, what is success to you, Dhruv?
I've shifted it to thinking about it a bit more internal than I used to, because obviously with the first project it streamed well and many amazing things happened with it, and I think having experienced that, I've started to realize and just feeling artistically like I did everything I could and making the thing I wanted to make, to me that feels like success.
Yeah. When did you realize that, okay, of course, we know that Double Take like really took that success to another level. But after that, did you struggle with a point where you were like, okay, now what next? Because it's always what do you do after that first initial success is what sort of like stems and cements your positioning, right? With that pressure, of course, being at the back end, how did you deal with that pressure? Because what did you tell? What was the pep talk that you did with yourself that, you know, let's go, it's okay, we have to keep going?
It is, I'm not going to lie, it is definitely tough to think about how to convert a moment into a career. Also because everybody has an idea about it.
Yeah,
and
true.
Everybody has an idea, and when something like that happens, everybody wants to pitch their idea. Do this, go here, make this kind of song. And it's one, I think, tuning into your gut. For me, intuitively, like what feels right is the only way that I'm going to be able to live with my decisions.
True.
I'm not going to be able to live my decision if something doesn't feel right and somebody else tells me that this is what I'm supposed to do, and I do it and then I regret it. So intuitively, intuition is definitely a big part of it. And then it's also like, it's what I said earlier about connecting with the reason you do it in the first place, which for me is like a love of music. And even if my career ended, you know, on this album, I would feel at least that I did what I needed to do. I did.
Listen, you're just getting started.
Yeah, but I'm saying hypothetically, in the most like fatalist, you know, point of view, I feel like I have done what I could.
Absolutely, and I'm really waiting to see how audiences react to it as well. But at the same time, I want to know from you that who have been your inspirations, because I feel that the people who inspired or the musicians who inspire you as a child to get into this or as a teenager, not necessarily, I mean, the more you get into it, the more you learn, the more, I mean, you get inspired by different people.
Yeah.
At this point, who are your inspirations when it comes to music?
So for this album, I was listening back to a lot of like British soul albums from the early 2000s. I was listening to Frank Back to Black by Amy Winehouse. I was listening to Duffy's music. I was listening to Adele's music, and just, you know, all-encompassing soul as well, like Janis Joplin as well, and like random eclectic, you know, things like the Beatles. I'd listen to Revolver. I obviously listened to all the Beatles albums, but I think Revolver was one that I was listening to a lot. It's, you know, in classic Beatles fashion, kind of weird one. So it was very wide-ranging.
I could just see you just named like 5 artists.
Yeah,
already.
completely different. It was very wide-ranging. And going into the album, I didn't really know what it was going to sound like, but I wanted to do something very organic and very live, in keeping with just some of these albums and the way that they sound.
Correct.
I think when I initially started and was in the studio, that was the direction I was going in, and the producer that I was working with encouraged me to think about these things in a modern context, and so it's predominantly live, but it has touches of things that make the records feel modern.
And what makes you, or where do you get your confidence from when it comes to just featuring in music videos? Because you essentially come across as someone who is an introvert.
Yeah, 100%.
And for any introvert to sort of be on camera in itself is like a huge thing.
It's huge.
But are you now comfortable watching yourself in videos? Because I think for the longest time, people, like when you just start off, you're very critical and you cringe a lot.
I'm definitely better at it, more comfortable being in front of the camera. More comfortable in these kinds of settings though, talking to people about music, about their lives, whatever it is. The music video stuff, it feels like something just to get better at, you know. There's so many things that as an introvert I've had to conquer being in this industry. It's the most extroverted thing you could possibly do, being on stage, like talking to audiences, and so there's many things that I think I'm still not perfect at, and I'm still learning, but I'm definitely not waking up on the day of a shoot being like, oh my god, I don't want to go. Yeah, it's getting to a place where I'm like, okay, I have a shoot today, and like it'll be fun.
The perspective is changing, and I like that. Yeah. But what is the pep talk that you give to yourself before going on a stage? Because I just feel that it's with me, right? Like I just take that 5 seconds before an interview, because I know now I have to be completely in there, and that is exactly what is needed when you are on stage as well, because here you are just exposing yourself to this crowd, right? So what is it that you tell yourself? It could be anything silly also. Sometimes it's just like, oh, you can't like go out now, so just
I tell myself I just tell myself, give it your all, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and you're like, you can go home and be in bed.
That's a good motivation, actually.
You can go home and be very quiet for the rest of the day, be introverted, watch TV, do whatever you want. For the next 40 minutes, just give it
all your energy and like just be in the moment.
And be here. And also I remind myself when I'm really anxious, it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be fun. And somehow that kind of gets me.
I mean, it's not like you have any other choice, to be very honest. When
No,
you're on stage,
it's the most final thing ever. It's like you
it's
have
like
to
do
go.
Or die at that point.
It's like it's more final than an exam. I remember used to be before an exam being like,
oh my god, yes.
Right, and I love performing, but definitely there's this like pressure of like, will people think I'm good? It feels like a public exam.
That's true.
In the back of my mind.
Also, a lot of how you are on stage also depends on the energy that you're getting from 100%. The fans. How has that experience been? Because sometimes the crowd can be enjoying the music, but they are not necessarily very expressive.
Right.
Because I remember I had interviewed Ed Sheeran recently, and he said that, he's performed at places where the crowd is not extremely energetic and he doesn't really know if they're enjoying it or not.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, then how do you deal with that? Because that's the only way you know if they're enjoying it or not. If they're not expressing it enough, how do you keep going? Because you know it instantly shows.
I mean, sometimes they just don't care,
Yeah.
which is like the reality when I opened for this artist called Joji. His fan base is so like just all kinds of people.
Yeah,
Like, really,
yeah.
really nice, supportive fan base, but definitely like, many people, I would say 99.83% of people were there to see him.
Yeah, yeah.
And so in those environments, people aren't there to see you, and there's something to prove, which can be motivating. I will be honest and say the worst shows that I've ever played have been when I'm getting nothing from the crowd,
Yeah.
and I just feel awkward. I'm just like standing up on stage.
Yeah.
Because you
just
do.
like, yeah.
Because like there was a festival that I played recently where they had mic'd the crowds.
Oh my God.
They had mic'd the crowd, so as soon as I got on stage, in my ears I could just hear chatter like the whole time.
Oh my
as I was
God.
performing, and it was like my sister was in the audience. She was like, that was just bad to me.
No, but I can imagine. I mean, just imagine. Oh, you're already in that zone where you're like, sort of like.
Yeah,
It is about the action, reaction. I feel, and
I think so.
it kind of affects. The
best performers, no, the best performers are probably like, it doesn't matter what the environment is, it doesn't matter what the conditions are, but I think the performing is the thing that I'm like the artistry, the writing, that's like my thing, and I think
Yeah.
everything else I'm like learning how to do and getting better at, and I still even a show like that, I still enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah.
Even if I don't
that
match.
is where you can experiment and
do whatever you want.
Yeah,
Just like
it's like your sample.
exactly.
It's sampling.
Except it's more nerve-wracking because like they're like maybe they're not paying as much attention, but there's no love coming from them, so
Yeah.
you don't feel like you can be like anything you do is gonna
Yeah, that's true.
get their attention. So
Also, since we mentioned double take, I obviously have to ask because a 17 member, Joshua did a cover for
Yeah.
it, and I remember it like people went ballistic
Right.
when he did that cover. What was your reaction like?
I thought it was an amazing cover, and he seems like such a genuine, sweet person, and for him to 17 are huge, and
Yep.
for him to want to sing my song and cover it, I'm so thankful because it brought so much more exposure to the song.
Absolutely.
And seems like a great person. We haven't actually met, but would love to meet him at some point.
Are you in touch with him though? Will we ever see? Because now I feel like I mentioned, because music is going so global, the chances of collaborations
Yeah.
have become so much more easier, right?
Yeah.
It's not a distinct thought.
Yeah.
Earlier I thought that it would be like it might happen one
Right.
day, but today it is a possibility.
It's easier to connect with
Yeah.
people digitally. Definitely a possibility. We were in talks to do something, and the timing of it just didn't quite align, but huge fan of theirs, of 17's, and would love to at some point.
Lovely. And what about India? Will we see you sort of like collab here as well? Because I'm sure a lot of people would look forward to that.
Yeah, I would love to. The scene here is amazing. It's booming,
It is.
and I definitely have my virtual friends here as
Yeah.
well. So I would love to. It has been amazing to come and tour here because I guess there's a myth about India outside of India being it doesn't necessarily have the infrastructure to bring in artists who don't live in the region. There are all these myths about it, and I think to come here and do it last year, begging my team and my agent saying like, let's go, let's make this happen, and to do it and for it to be such an amazing experience, I hope that it just I hope other artists feel encouraged by that, but also for me personally, like, again, the best time here, and I would love to keep coming back here. I want to tour my music here. I'm doing a listening event, obviously, tomorrow in Bombay.
I know, I'm coming.
Oh, you're coming as well? Okay, amazing.
So for that. No, but I completely agree. There's this myth about, I don't know, as artists, how do you delve with that? Because, of course, the country, there's a lot that people think about the country, but as someone who has an Indian origin as well, but haven't grown up in a different place and doing music in a different language, which comes authentic to you, but there's this identity crisis which everyone sort of like balances, because I remember I was talking to Eric once, Eric Nam, and he is a Korean American, right?
Yep.
And he said that it's very difficult because you're never really fully Korean or you're never fully American, because there's this duality that you are always struggling with. Do you also sometimes feel that?
I think so, but also I'm fortunate to have grown up in Singapore, which is 5 hours away, and everybody, barring my nuclear family, so barring my parents, everybody in my family lives in India. And from the moment I was young, it felt important for my parents for me and my sister to come here.
Yeah.
So we came here. My nani and my dadi live in Delhi. So my dad's originally from Jaipur. So spent lots of time in Delhi.
I'm also from Jaipur.
No way.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah. So that's I spent lots of time when I was a kid in India. I spent lots of time in Jaipur, lots of time in Delhi. So I think being rooted in that when you're a kid, and then obviously I moved to the US when I was like 18, 19, it makes it, I feel very connected. I say I'm Indian, I have an Indian passport, I feel connected to being more Indian than anything else.
Yeah. But okay, so now finally your album will be out, and it will be out for the listeners to sort of enjoy and have their opinions on. But what is that one thing that you really want to achieve next? Because I think with this album you have really touched upon different sides of you which you didn't earlier.
Yeah.
But the potential is immense. What next for you?
I have an idea about what I want to do next, and it's going to be completely different from what I just did and from what I did the first time.
So this will be like slightly more cooler, because everything is intense right now.
Everything is very intense. The cooler thread is exactly it. I want to do something like fun and not so much on the brain. I want to do something that's a bit more loose.
Do you want to will we see you dancing next?
Oh, that no. that's not happening. But
you never know. You never say never, Dhruv. You never know what happens.
The pivot from like music video, nervous to full on dance breaks.
I don't know.
And stuff.
I envision you dancing also. You never know.
I mean, that's very kind. I think that maybe that's like a few years along, but definitely something looser, something more fun, something more summery is in my cards.
Okay, so looking forward to that as well. Thank you for this chat.
Yes, it was lovely talking to you.
I hope that the album does really well, and finally people can sort of like move on from double take syndrome. I mean, it's great.
Double
we can go back, listen to it ample number of times, but there's more music coming in from Dhruv. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.